So that's everyone, is it, Ramona, that we're expecting?
Yes, I think so, Peter.
Okay, well, in the absence of the chair then, as vice chair, I will call the meeting to order. Is that okay, Ramona? Are we recording? Yep. And I will ask anyone if they have declarations of conflict of interest to declare or not. I hear no declarations of conflict of interest, so we will move on to consider the minutes of the October 20th, 2020 meeting. I had one requested amendment, which is that Graham Miner, the Director of Highway Safety, spells his name M-I-N-E-R instead of O-R as it was in the minutes. Any other errors or omissions? Would someone like to move adoption of the minutes of the October 20th meeting? Moved by Margaret. Seconder.
I'll second.
Seconded by Jason. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Contrary-minded nay. Motion carried. Looking then at the agenda for the December 8th meeting that was circulated, any additions or changes to the agenda?
I just have a business arising via minutes.
Okay. Would someone like to move approval of the agenda of this meeting?
I will. It's Heather.
Moved by Heather. Margaret, will you second? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Contrary-minded nay. Motion carried. Agenda approved. Business arising from the minutes. Ramona.
So I just wanted to mention, as you mentioned there, Graham Miner in the minutes, and I was to invite him to our next meeting. So I'm sorry I didn't get to that. But maybe I could write him a note before Christmas time, and hopefully we could get him on the agenda for the new year, if that would be okay with everybody.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Any other business arising from the minutes of the last meeting? Nope. Okay, we'll move on to Section 5, reporting from department liaisons, and 5A, Public Works, which would be Jason.
Nothing been into that much. I do see that they're making quite a bit of progress on the active transportation trail along the perimeter highway, which is awesome. Looks really good. And they've also made a huge progress on that St. Peter's Road tunnel. So I'm quite surprised at the work they've gotten done in such a short period of time, which is really nice to see.
I did have one item that I must be put on the agenda under Public Works, which is on the agenda as provisions for pedestrians surrounding construction sites. And I did circulate a document from Halifax in Teams earlier today with regard to that. And I'm not really suggesting that we have a full discussion on this as much as maybe we work to gather information about it if the task force members agree it's a priority. My focus would be on issues of when development happens or when street construction happens, what happens to sidewalks and street access for pedestrians, people in wheelchairs and bicycles. And I'm thinking of situations like the new building next to the Pilot House, or the new Homburg Hotel on Kent Street, or the new library, where really kind of ad hoc sidewalk closed signboards go up with no kind of official, seemingly no official provision made for pedestrian access. And in the document I circulated from Halifax, they went into great detail considering that kind of thing and talking about construction management plans and things that developers and other people who would be affecting encroachments needed to agree to. So I would propose, unless others disagree, that we table discussion of that to a future meeting, but that you use that document from Halifax kind of as a starting point for your thinking.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And I had been in contact with the mayor because the Longworth Avenue intersection was just a terrible mess. Huge potholes. According to them, it was a third party contractor that was doing the work, not the city. And they left it in a terrible condition. At one point, they even had a blockade across the trail itself, just left across the trail. Super dangerous because the path that they were getting people to go into was literally the ditch. So there was other people complaining too. I had gotten tagged in an email from it. So wasn't very happy to see how that went down, especially after they responded and said, "Yeah, we'll contact the contractor." The contractor did the very minimal, like it was. I don't know who was doing the work, but I said, that type of thing is just not acceptable. It was dangerous,
Right.
and the vehicles, and it was dark at night. You can't see there, so I really think that's a really positive thing to have some guidelines on what to do.
And Peter, I do have just a small update from Scott in Public Works on that.
Okay.
So they're working right now on a. Is that me that's making the noise? I don't. Do you guys hear that?
I do hear that. Yeah.
Lots of feedback.
Okay.
Does everyone who's not talking want to try muting just to see if that helps with Ramona?
Sure.
Go ahead, Ramona.
Okay, so Public Works is currently working on changing all the provisions for pedestrian access. They're working on the construction management bylaw. So this bylaw will detail what contractors have to do with the public right-of-way and include a plan for dealing with pedestrian traffic along construction sites. So the document is currently in draft form. So maybe if you wouldn't mind sending me a copy of that, that work you got ahead from Halifax, Peter, I can forward that along to Scott and his team, and perhaps they could integrate some of those items into the bylaw that they're currently working on.
That's great. I'll do that. The chair recognizes the mayor who has just joined us. Welcome.
How are you guys? Sorry for being late. Late supper.
Moving on to section 5B, Parks and Recreation. I, as the liaison, have nothing to report. Does anybody have any concerns for me to bring to Parks and Recreation? Ramona, I had asked, and I think it was minuted, that you were going to talk to Charlottetown Water and Sewer about the fiber optic cable construction and any remediation they might do.
Yeah, so I know that Nancy and Richard have been in discussions on this because Nancy McMillan, our park superintendent, is also displeased about the state of the trail after the work has gone through. So she's been working with Water and Sewer Utility to try to figure out what they can accomplish before sort of the end of this construction season. That's kind of all the update I have for now, but those conversations are sort of ongoing at the moment.
Well, it's good to know that Nancy's on top of it.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
could I ask Ramona, and Councillor Tweel can chirp in or give his opinion. We've discussed this at Water and Sewer. It's a water and sewer project to install this fiber opt. I believe it's Daniel Mullins who's doing the installation, and he is, I think, required or contracted to install 30 kilometers of fiber app conduit, and then after the conduit is installed, he has to go back and insert the fiber op. So his contract, I believe, is to end by the end of this December, but you can go to different parts of the trail and it remains open. There are open holes, and there's a lot of work to be done. And as you know, it stretches out to Suffolk, to our well field out there. I think there's also a fiber op a conduit and fiber optic wire going out to Brackley. So there's a lot of work yet to be done, and this is to be. I originally it was to be done with directional drilling, which is you go underneath and drill, and he's been doing along. I think Peter, if I'm correct, he's been digging out, burying the cable or the conduit, and then filling that back in. So that's our infrastructure, and as Councillor Twill knows, the city has put a lot of money into that 14 kilometers of trail over the years. So there's a lot more work to do.
Yeah.
And I'd like to get an update.
My concern, Mr. Mayor, is simply that, not only the condition the trail's been left in, but then I think it makes the trail far more vulnerable to washouts over the winter in areas where it's not well drained. So I think it's going to be an even bigger problem next spring. So
Yeah. I'll bring it up at the next water and sewer meeting to find out, to gauge where we're going with this project.
sure. Councillor Twill, did you have anything to add there?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, well, obviously before the contract was signed, there would have to be prerequisites in the contract where he's held responsible to put the trail back exactly the way he found it. Right, so I think we need to get our hands on that documentation, and whether it's water and sewer or Parks and Recreation, I think we need to revisit that to make sure that those terms and conditions are outlined and illustrated in that contract. And then we'll have a better sense if we can, as to whether or not we can actually hold him accountable, because right now, and this is not to be critical, but he seems to have free rein.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And one final point, Mr. Chair, the general contractor for this project is Williams Murphy McLeod. So Daniel Mullins is working through WM&M, and I've been trying to reach out to Rodney Murray, who is with WM&M, to get an idea where we're going with this project. He has yet to get back to me, but I will follow up.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on, if there's no other Parks and Recreation notes, to police, and that is Margaret. You're muted, Margaret. There you go.
Hi, I have nothing to report from that committee.
Okay, thank you. Sustainability, I think that's Joanne.
I am. With the help of Peter and Carrie and Mitch, we reworked a brief to the Standing Committee on Sustainability and the Environment, and we submitted it to Ramona, who was going to take it to that committee. And Ramona, can you brief us, tell us what happened from there?
Yes, for sure. So we brought forward the recommendations from the AT task force, and the committee agreed that they would be considered when we're developing our capital project priorities for this coming fiscal year. We also submitted 9 applications to the PEI Active Transportation Fund on Friday. So that included some of those recommendations that were in the AT task force. So the continuation of the bypass highway project was kind of our first priority. And then some design work on a couple other pieces, as well as the Grafton Street connection to the trail that will be coming off the Hillsborough Bridge was the other priority that was noted by the task force. And then I believe in that one too, you talked about sort of the Sherwood area with the modular blocks, so Maple and connections to Stone Park. So that one was put in as well. Now, we are still pending council approval on what is concluded in our capital budget, but because their deadline kind of came up before we finalized our capital budget, we did have to get some applications in there. So I think we've got, we were able to respond to some of those priorities from the task force. And then hopefully now we can solidify it by having it put in our capital budget.
Sounds good. Did the Nassau Street proposal make it in?
The NASA Street, what we put in was a pilot project on the modular blocks. So we talked about Maple as like our first location, but I think there's definitely openness to expanding on that as a pilot, but that we would want to test it out, even like how much design work does it need? What is our costing on some of those on those blocks? So NASA wasn't specifically named, but we did have a pilot project in there with the modular blocks. And that, Joanne, it could potentially not be that expensive of a project. It's more trying to figure out the logistics of making it work than it is the cost. So while the fund is important, it's not as important as the test and trial and figuring out how do we put something like this in place.
Sure.
It's much of a barrier, if that makes sense.
Yes, because you had sort of mentioned, well, the task force was concerned about once we had the routes, how do we maintain them was a big concern of our task force.
Yes.
But you also said, and we supported that, was that the community has to be informed or sold on the idea or presented, this sort of thing, and that might require outside consultation, right? Like somebody to take that and spearhead that. So I can appreciate, that the logistics and things that would go hand in hand with those projects.
Yeah. And Public Works, so about our Quiet Streets initiative that kind of came out of this committee. Yeah. So Public Works is also looking at other sort of traffic calming, traffic control. And some of those projects, like even NASA or this one on Maple Avenue, it's kind of like it fits into both categories. So there's still a lot of discussion happening on that. But again, as I said, the budgets haven't been finalized and approved by council yet. So at this point, it's more, let's reach out and see if we can get support on some of these projects. We can bring it to council to hopefully to get leverage some additional funds.
Thank you.
Anything else, Joanne?
Yes, just briefly. Peter, I followed up from you. A month ago, you had gone on your bicycle to the new route that was connecting UPEI up to its alumni building on the new road. And you had noted that there weren't any painted lines, and you also noted that there weren't any signs. Anyway, it was a beautiful afternoon. I walked down there last week, and there's 3 whole signs of a pedestrian shared with a bicycler, 2 coming back and 1 going, or vice versa, and nice big signposts posted 25 kilometers an hour, like in places, as well as an alert post, one of those blue posts. But it was a beautiful walk because, at the bottom of sort of the down, there's the trees and the birds were there, but it's not open. So my question to Ramona is, what is the plan, or do you know, for University Avenue? It looked to me like they put a new island in, and then it looked to me like they took the island out. So do we know how that access road is going to cross with Edmund Crescent, or what the plan is?
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah. So that's, Joanne, there's been an issue between the city and the university about the original design. And you'll notice that there's now a dedicated right turning lane going into Edmund Crescent South. That was not originally in the plan. How it got there, it's there now. So the median that was installed, there was a compromise reached between the city, the university, and the architecture firm of Coles Associates. And it was taken out because now that allows for a dedicated left lane into the north entrance of UPEI. And it's now open. It's a fully functional entrance, but just remember, you're now crossing 6 lanes of traffic. There's no pedestrian refuge. That was the purpose of the median. It was to act as a pedestrian refuge. That's gone. So There will be, it remains to have a crossing at Enmond South and one at Enmond North. And Enmond South will connect us to that active transportation pathway. And I think if any improvements have to be made to the active transportation pathway going into the university on the north end, I think it's just a matter of us calling Jackie Podger or Freddie or Rel, and they'll follow up. So it is open, and I think it's going to expand the use of the active transportation pathway going over to the Confederation Trail. That's the connecting point. And we are looking at some money for the Hermitage Creek connection to take us right up to Enmond Crescent South. So a lot of good things happening.
Yeah.
And you can see what's going on at the bridge. The province is making that extension in front of the former government garage. The bridge extension is going across Hillsborough Bridge. I know we got an email from Sean Kane, very pleased that the Beach Grove active transportation pathway opened up that goes from Main Point Road right up to those trails. And Sean Murphy was to come to a meeting yesterday for Parks and Recreation to discuss the Western connection, but he didn't make it. And I know I can report that Derek Tweel, who works with the Murphy Pharmacy, he's very keen in working with some kind of a group, with one of these groups to get this going. So there's a lot of positive work going on. And thanks to Ramona applying for all this federal FCM funding, it makes it easier to get these projects up and going.
Either yourself or Ramona know, or maybe even Mitch. I know the city just put in that underground pathway on St. Peter's Road. Was there anything that came out of that would make it that we've learned to put that trail across the Trans-Canada to get the trail to the other side?
Across University Avenue. Councillor
Yeah.
Tweel, any information?
Well, as you know, at our last meeting, and maybe Ramona can help, we discussed having the engineer to have a special committee meeting to meet with the engineer who's responsible. And we look from a historical perspective, this gentleman was responsible for widening University Avenue 10 years ago. He is responsible for the new road going into the University of Prince Edward Island off of University Avenue. And he's working with Nancy McMinn on revitalizing the pathways and the trails coming from Hermitage Creek. So I don't know where that is, Ramona. It's now with COVID, I guess we'll have to wait till the new year. I'd rather have the meeting with the engineer in person as opposed to doing it on Zoom. I think it gives us a better interaction. Not that there's anything wrong with this format. I think it's a great format, but we need to have that meeting as soon as possible, because the offer from the province, in particular the Minister of Transportation and Public Works, the Honorable Stephen Myers, is that they are willing to pay 80% of the cost. And that offer is not going to be on the table, forever. So we've got to explore that and take full advantage of it.
Yeah.
As you pointed out, Mr. Mayor, what is it? 5 lanes now going across University Avenue at that interval?
Six on.
Sorry,
six,
well, 6 lanes.
six,
I mean,
six on the north side. Yeah.
like if I had a son or daughter, I'd be pretty worried about it. I mean, and that traffic, I mean, the police are there for a reason, right? Police are there for a reason, because they're going through there like it's the Indianapolis 500.
Okay, Joanne, do you have anything to follow up?
No, thank you very much.
Okay. Moving on to cycling PEI. Jason, anything to report?
No, nothing there.
Okay. And Carrie, Bike Friendly Charlottetown?
I can let you know that we are officially working towards incorporating as a nonprofit, which is very exciting. So we're kind of working on our internal processes and bylaws right now, and we'll be making an announcement about that in the new year. So exciting things happening.
Thank you. Moving on to new business. Does anyone have new business to bring up?
Chair, Peter, I
Yes.
do want to bring to everyone's attention that I'm very, very impressed with Mitch Underhay and the work that he's doing, his commitment, his dedication, and he was in to present to Public Works. Ramona was there, myself, the mayor was there, and not sure who else. Had a chance to have a coffee with him the next day, and I just can't underline just how much work this gentleman has put into making this city more cycle friendly. And I think we need to recognize that at a later date. But just an incredible individual, and has really taken up the torch since his brothers passed away. And we got a lot to be grateful for.
Indeed.
So, Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr.
just on the bike-friendly Charlottetown presentation that Councillor Tweel referred to, Ramona, did we follow up with his 3 options? He presented 3 options at that meeting.
Mhm. So some of those were endorsed by the AT task force in that letter that was written to the committee. And then the scenarios that he presented were taking advantage of the PEI AT fund. So those applications have been made. And then the only sort of question mark, I guess, that still remains is whether the province will entertain active transportation related project applications to the COVID recovery fund. So
Under the
that's the 80%, and it does say that technically it can be for active transportation, but we haven't gotten any official word. To my knowledge, we haven't been given any official word on that. So that is kind of like, that would be sort of contingent on us having access to that other stream of funding, because the AT, even what we applied to the AT fund, I mean, I would hope that we would get it, but they're not going to allocate the entire 5 million to us.
No.
I think our total ask was over 2 million to that fund. And I mean, we did that in the strategy of let's apply for as much as we can, and we'll work on getting, we'll work on building sort of support, more funding support for that. But it's unlikely that we're going to be able to do everything that we would like to do unless we have another stream of funding available to us.
So, Mr. Chair, the pedestrian underpass or the active transportation underpass on St. Peter's Road, it's not going ahead this year because of the construction season was shortened and there were a lot of other work going on, but it will take place in the spring. And I think I told Ramona it's I think Jason asked me about the cost. Steve Pickett, who's the engineer on site, said that the box is about 800,000. So I wonder if that money is being covered under the COVID-19 resiliency fund, or is that just coming out of provincial government funding? Do you know, Ramona?
I don't.
Councillor Tweel?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. No, it's being funded entirely by the province.
Okay.
The city's not involved in any funding formula for that particular project. That's a project that's being executed by the province, and full credit to them.
Okay.
Okay, I did have one piece of new business, which was more a question than anything else, and that was just with regards to park benches, not necessarily directly active transportation related, but certainly active transportation adjacent. It seems as though the longstanding policy has been to remove park benches in the autumn and bring them back in the spring, which is understandable for snow clearing and other reasons. It does strike me, especially with the shutdown of indoor dining and people needing to get their exercise outside, that although it's not necessarily the most pleasant thing to sit outside in the middle of the winter, it's not impossible also. And I wondered just whether there could be a look at providing more opportunities, maybe not all the park benches, but places to sit in the winter because there's nowhere else to go.
I know Discover Charlottetown has a nice initiative going on right now with the red chairs. So I know that's not everywhere, but it is kind of like one example of that, I guess, where they're trying to provide outdoor seating that's available to people and that's meant as a winter sort of initiative. But I hear what you're saying on the park benches too. I'm nervous about them just getting completely pummeled with snow.
Well, I understand. Any other
It's
new
some-
business? Oh, sorry, Mr. Mayor.
It's something I can bring up the Parks, Recreation, Leisure.
Okay, thank you. Margaret?
I was just going to bring up, I dropped something, a few articles in Teams today as I had the task of doing a bit of research in terms of snow removal once the active transportation lanes are put in. So I put those articles in there, and it was an interesting search and read. And I think one of them is rather old, but I still think the fact remains the same, is that I think the people using the lanes seem to be quite creative in how to be able to ensure that they can be active in their daily life. But I'm also wondering in terms of how we are going to have dedicated human resources to be able to support those active transportation lanes in the city, especially. So I did reach out, as I did state last month, to Ruth DeLong, and I did reach to Stephen Myers too. So I haven't heard back. I do think I'll probably chat with Ruth first and just get some intake and perhaps some guidance or direction, and maybe the approach. But I think it. What I've learned is that it's not that it just definitely takes some dedicated human resources and people and folks to keep those lanes free, as well as the active users. So it seems like it's a collaborative process in many areas. So I was happy to see that. So that's what I wanted to report to the committee this evening.
Thank you, Margaret. Any other new business? Would someone like to move that we adjourn? Anyone?
It's Heather.
Heather, thank you. Ramona, do we have a date set for our next meeting?
It looks like maybe we don't. I just checking the calendar there, and I think maybe we did them up until the end of December. Now I'm thinking about it. So it doesn't appear to be anything in the calendar.
Could we perhaps do the second week of January, like a 12th or a 13th?
Sounds good.
The second week of January, the 12th or the 13th. Is there somebody that Wednesdays is not okay? Is that Ryan?
Joanne?
I don't know. The 12th
Tuesdays,
is
bro-
fine.
Wednesdays
12th.
for me are never good. Tuesdays and Thursdays for me work.
You said Tuesdays work for you, Jason?
Tuesdays and Thursdays are my best days. Yeah.
What about Tuesday the 12th then, Ramona?
Yep, that sounds good to me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Meeting adjourned. See you next
Merry
time.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Stay safe.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, Jojo.